Hello, welcome again to FairtaX Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
I'm Bob Scarborough.
and we are
Uh,
the FairtaX Guys. How do you like my window seat at the International Space Station?
I was going to say, can you see my banner plane flying down here in North Carolina from up there?
Oh, yeah, I can. Again, when I'm talking about a little virtual background I'm using for the video, if you're listening to the radio or an audio only podcast, you need to go to the video archive at our FairtaX Guys YouTube channel or the Rumble archive we keep on this and see what we're talking about. I've just found these little virtual backgrounds fascinating to play with. I'm actually sitting on my couch at the house, but you nearly can't tell that.
That's right. He leaned back during pre-production today, and I thought maybe he was, falling, wherever his stage is set up. And anyway, so yeah, that's good, man. I like the background there.
Yeah, and I don't have a stage. We're just sitting here, but talking about the fair tax as we normally do. But say, I just got back from Alaska a couple of weeks ago, and now decided to go farther than Alaska, just completely out of the world here. So there we go.
That's right.
Oh,
I guess you
we,
could say that the fair tax is an out of this world proposal for making things simple, funding the government instead
it
of
is.
consumption.
And the income tax is out of the world crazy when it comes to what the Congress critters want to do to it every week. And we try to keep an eye on that here on FairtaX Power Radio. Before we get into that, though, let's make a quick announcement. We do not have an exact date in place yet, but as an annual thing now, we have
Yep.
been doing one FairtaX Power Radio show. We usually record these on Zoom a week or so ahead of the streaming date. And then the radio station plays them a little bit after that. But
Hmm.
in mid to late October, we have yet to come up with a date yet. Probably by the time we come up with next week's FairtaX Power Radio, we will have a date scheduled. But we will be coming back up. I'll be flying up from Florida to the radio station there in North Carolina, and we will be doing a live FairtaX Power Radio on a Sunday morning. We're still on at 8 a.m., correct up there?
That's correct. Yes. We get up just after the chickens do.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. So we will be there. That's the one time of the year that we can actually directly interact with people who are listening to the program. So
Yeah.
hopefully, if you've got something you'd like to know about the fair tax or questions for the fair tax guys or something like that, we will be live on WTOB. And of course, you don't have to be right there in the Winston-Salem vicinity to get the station. WTOB is carried on a number of streaming platforms out there. You can listen to it anywhere in the world. We would suggest you do so on
Okay.
October, whichever date that we come up with, and certainly look forward to seeing you at that point.
Yeah, it'll be a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock time. Yeah.
And then, of course, as always, you bring your video camera. We will record that, and
Sure.
that will stream later on our regular video podcast as well. So that we get to mess with the schedule there a little bit. But that's going to be fun. Coming up to Winston-Salem, get my annual fill of Mr. Barbecue and Cheerwine, and do our live FairtaX Hour radio show from up there at the radio station in Winston-Salem. How cool is that? Okay, now we can get back to what the Congress critters are doing to the tax code. And I really didn't find anything that was worthy of the Hall of Shame, but I tell you, the entire process should be in the Hall of Shame.
No
But this
kidding.
this would this one kind of made me laugh a little bit. This is HR 4613, the Bubble Tax Modernization Act of 2025. It's from Representative Andrea Salinas of Oregon District 6. And these things actually have gotten a little better about putting text in them, which means now I just got to drill down through a couple of screens in order to find it. And this is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to remove the differentiation between mead and low alcohol by volume wines for the purpose of the tax imposed on wines. Now, I will admit to knowing absolutely nothing about wine. I have never drunk a drop of it in my life and never intend to. So I don't know what the difference between mead and low alcohol by volume wine is, but this particular bill wants to remove the differentiation between those two. Apparently, they're taxed differently, and this bill wants to tax them the same if I'm reading it right.
Mercy. Yeah, I don't know much about wine. I do know there are some people that I work with that whine a lot, but that's a whole different story. Yeah. So this is
Oh,
bubble tax. Bubble tax. Is that like sparkling kind of thing?
I guess maybe this the kind of wine it's talking about is sparkly stuff, but it says the Bubble Tax Modernization Act of 2025. Why don't we just quit worrying about the differentiation between various types of wine in the tax code and just leave that to legislation unto its own rather than putting it into the it's amazing how much that's in the tax code can and actually should be handled by specific legislation addressing that subject. If you're going to give somebody money, just give them money. Don't try to give them a tax refund or a tax credit or something like that. Why are we using the tax code purposes and purposes and purposes and purposes other than just funding the government and getting the money we need to operate the government? That's crazy. That's what the fair tax does. It just simply funds the government at its current level and without all the rigmarole that we see in the income tax. Okay, let's move on. HR 4589. Oh, look at that. I found another tax credit. This is the Port Crane Tax Credit Act of 2025. Representative Mike Ezell of Mississippi. And again, I got to drill into here to find the text to see exactly what this description is. And it says, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish tax credits to incentivize the domestic production of port cranes and for other purposes. I saw that first thing. It says port crane. Is that a kind of a bird that I don't know about? Nope. We're talking about
Yeah,
those.
they
We're
stand
talking.
over on the left. The port cranes. They
Yeah,
usually up on the left. Yeah.
yeah, port side. Okay, but no, we're talking about the gigantic pieces of machinery that pick up these. A lot of times, it's just a shipping container that's the size of a truck trailer, and you're picking cargo up and putting it on a ship, or then picking it up on the ship and putting it on all the port cranes that move freight from ships to the docks. And apparently, a lot of those port cranes are made outside the United States. And so, this particular bill wants to establish a tax credit to incentivize domestic production of port cranes and for other purposes. I got a good idea. If you want to incentivize the production of anything in the United States, just stop taxing the manufacturers that are making it, whether it's airplanes or port cranes or cars or bicycles or electric motorcycles or whatever you want to do. If you want to incentivize business of any kind, stop taxing it. And that's what the fair tax does. So, Representative Ezell, if you really want to incentivize the production of domestic port cranes, get on board with the fair tax. It'll do it a lot better than your HR 4589 will.
Great Scott. Port cranes.
Port cranes. You've probably got some of those there in North Carolina. I mean, Wilmington, you got some
Yeah,
port
well,
cities there. Morehead City, I think, is a
Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to remember my Carolina geography from when I used to live there. But yeah, we got them here in Florida. We see them in Tampa a lot, and of course, Miami is a huge port. Jacksonville, and so yeah, we need domestic port cranes, and we need to have the fair tax to incentivize their production.
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? Okay, let's work on this one. This is Representative Joe. Hope I'm pronouncing this right. Neguse, Neguse. This is from Colorado, District 2, HR 4573. 4573. This is called the Innovate to Save Lives Act. How cool is that? And this says, get ready to amend the Internal Revenue Code. Oh, would you believe I found another tax credit to provide a credit to small businesses for research activities related to the mitigation of certain drug threats? How can you have a tax code without that?
We will never know
Well, I
because
don't know if this will pass or not. We'll see.
yeah, I think sometimes they just do it just for the sake of putting something in place so that the next thing that happens is there could be some action on it or not. Or
I think they just put it in place because the lobbyist says I'll pay you X number of dollars to do it.
yeah, well, right. And if they're, at least they've got some traction or they have all of this. And even so far, I mean, we're just scratching the surface of details. And but you can go in and do what we do at congress.gov and search the legislation for the current session and have fun like we do
Yeah,
every time.
put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes into the search function there at the top of the page so that you're searching on that entire string and not just each individual word.
Right.
And select legislation, current Congress on the left side. And again, as of the date we're looking at this, 1,134 hits on that search, which is a far larger number than the number of days Congress has been in session so far this year. So you
Mhm.
can see, how many proposals per day are just proposed to change the tax code. This thing is constantly changing, constantly shifting. None of it is for the benefit of the people. It's all for the benefit of the lobbyists and the politicians for the most part. And it's just crazy. We need to yank it out by the roots and replace it all with a fair tax.
Here,
Let's
here.
keep going. Grab one here from the Senate side. This is Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. S 2365, the Small Nonprofit Retirement Security Act of 2025. Oh, and I got a tickle in my throat again. Hang on, I gotta have some cheer
Stand
right here.
by while Mr. Paxton takes a break with some cheer wine.
I don't know what's making my throat tickle, but there it is. Okay, let's look again. The Small Nonprofit Retirement Security Act of 2025 is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to make the credit for small employer pension plan startup costs and the retirement auto enrollment credit to make those things available to tax exempt eligible small employers. You just have to laugh at some of this stuff.
Small employer pension plan startup.
Yeah, there's a small employer pension plan startup credit, a credit for covering those costs, and
Yeah.
a retirement auto enrollment credit that apparently exists for small businesses but does not extend to tax exempt eligible small employers. I think the key word there is tax exempt. So why? Tell you what, let's make everybody's income, individual, corporate, all income is tax exempt because we get rid of the income tax entirely, put the IRS out of business, and go to the fair tax, and then we won't need stuff like this.
Exactly. And a lot of people get confused, with we'll talk about this in just a minute about certain parts of the fair tax. But I mean, if you consider the complexity of the income tax code, you have to kind of wonder, I, I'm going to the beach and I have I got my sandals on. My feet aren't going to burn when I get down in the sand. And on the way, I'm not going to step in sand spurs with my shoes on. But if I take the shoes off, here's the tax code part of this. I'm going to step on everything that's in the ground, a pop bottle broken, I mean, you have to decide, which is going to be easier for you to navigate. And that would be the fair tax on consumption instead of income tax.
All right, one more. H.R. 4537. This is called the Chefs Act, sponsored by Representative Richie Torres of New York District 15. And H.R. 4537, as we dig down into it, is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code uh, to allow a credit against tax for expenses relating to the purchase and installation of qualified emissions control devices or in connection with qualified cook stoves or qualified char broilers of eligible small restaurant businesses. If you own a small business that happens to be a restaurant and this bill passes, you can get a credit against tax if you purchase and install qualified emission controls devices. I guess there are emissions coming from some restaurants. Or if you buy
Yeah.
qualified cook stoves, qualified charbroil equipment and stuff like that, you get a tax credit. This is crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So we're not going to be able to pump out our delicious char-broiled whatever it is into the parking lot and down the street to attract people to come into our restaurant. Is that what this device would do, I wonder?
I have no idea. I don't know what a qualified charbroiler of eligible small restaurant businesses is. particular qualified cook stoves. This is just crazy. And again, the key words there, qualified. The government gets to decide what qualifies and what doesn't. And as
Yeah,
we got
and it
into
doesn't say.
as we got into it last week here on Fair Tax, that isn't pretty. When the government decides what qualifies for some kind of special treatment and what doesn't, what you can and can't buy with your SNAP benefits and stuff, we just do not want the government in the business of making those kind of decisions for us relative to what is and what isn't taxable under the fair tax. We do not need the exemptions that people are trying to put into the fair tax, or at least some people say that should be in the fair tax, because we have got a much better, a much more eloquent, a much more efficient mechanism for handling that. We're going to talk about that here right now, coming up on Fair Tax Power Radio. But I'm thinking about putting this one, the 4537, in the Hall of Shame. I said I didn't find any Hall of Shame stuff. I may have changed my mind on this one. What you think?
I would, yeah. You got to throw it in there because the how are you going to get with a straight face debate in the halls of Congress what qualifies as the cook stove or the char broiler? I mean, how are you going to do? Because that has to be in the final legislation before it goes any further.
So there's qualified cook stoves. The government decides what qualifies and what doesn't. Qualified char broilers, same thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me again. And then there's eligible small restaurant businesses. So who's eligible and who's not? Who gets to decide that? Oh, would you believe government bureaucrats again? Exactly the kind of stuff we do not need in the fair tax. And that is exactly what we're going to get if we go along with the recommendations that some people make to us. Oh, wait a minute, the fair tax needs to have these exemptions in it. You shouldn't be taxing food. Well, what's food? You shouldn't be taxing medicine. All right, well, what qualifies as medicine? That is just absolutely nuts, because we don't want to put that kind of decision-making power into the hands largely of unelected government bureaucrats who can and do just kind of what they want. And that's crazy. So instead of having exemptions, the fair tax just simply says there are the exemptions in the fair tax are as follows. If you buy a used item rather than a new one, you are exempt for the fair tax. So the fair tax is going to tax every item you buy, but just one time to the original buyer. So if I buy a new car and 3 years later I sell it to you, then you don't pay any fair tax on that purchase, because that car has already been taxed once. I paid the fair tax when I bought it. You don't have to pay tax on it the second time when you buy it. Used cars, oh man, my Cheerwine's not working too good on this throat tickle again.
They're not taxed a second time, and same for clothing and things like that. I guess that would be the same for a used house too, wouldn't it?
It would. That's we've seen several times. In fact, our CPA buddy out in Colorado, Jade Wally, has mentioned several times in some of the articles he's written that two of the largest purchases that people ever make in their entire lifetimes, the largest, of course, would be their house. And then the automobiles, if you've seen the price of automobiles lately, the cars and houses are the biggest purchases people make. And if you buy used ones instead of new ones, no fair tax.
Right.
Fair tax does not apply to used items, and that's it. But then again, I would not suggest that you go down to the grocery store and buy used food. I don't think that's even available on the shelf. But whatever. But so there are some things that people need that they have to buy new, because either used ones just don't exist, the original one is used up in its entirety, or it's just not suitable to be used a second time. So there are things that you have to buy under the fair tax that would be taxed, and people look at it and says, you shouldn't be taxing food, you shouldn't be taxing medicines. Well, we're not. Well, what do you mean we're not? Well, we have a mechanism in the fair tax, and it's called the prebate. It's been a while since we've just kind of dug back into it. And again, I apologize if people are looking at this and they are already really real familiar with prebate. Why are you wasting time on this? No, we're trying to give resources to people who possibly don't fully understand the prebate, what it is, how it works, and how it would affect them if the fair tax were the law of the land. So let's just go into. We got about 8 minutes here. We could do a quick prebate 101.
Yes.
And And there are those of you who do understand how it works. Hopefully, you can use some of these talking points to explain it to your friends and family that don't know how it works. Now, currently, under the current income tax system, the income tax system does not tax every dollar you make. You have to list every dollar you make on your tax return, but then again, you get deductions from that. The biggest of which most people take is a standard deduction, which by definition is this is the money that you can make or you can earn tax free under the income tax system. We will not tax the first, what, $24,000, something in that neighborhood that you make because we realize you need that money to live. You only pay taxes on your income that is above what your deductions are. And they
Right.
say, all right, well, how do we apply that same kind of thinking to a consumption tax that is paid at the cash register when you buy things? It is just simply not logical and not practical. The logistics just do not support the idea of keeping track of how much everybody has spent, and you don't pay the tax until you have spent a particular amount. No, you just pay the tax on everything that you buy. But the mechanism for making a standard deduction in the fair tax is the prebate. You get back all of the taxes you pay on your spending up to the poverty level. It's that simple. Every year, the government figures out what the poverty levels are for various different household sizes. And then you know how much the poverty level is for a particular household. You know what 23% of that is, which is how much fair tax you will pay on that level of spending. And we just give you back the tax you pay. So you
Right.
don't take
Ahead
a
of time.
dime. You do not take a dime out of your own pocket to pay the fair tax until your spending rises above the poverty level. But the beauty of it, within the fair tax, there are no restrictions on what you can and can't buy tax free.
Yeah, it's
You,
essential. Up to you. The what when you get the prebate back, it's based on the poverty level, like Bob just said, and you get to take that money and buy what you deem to be essential goods and services. There's not anything like we talked about last week with the SNAP and you got this and that, but we're not talking about eliminating SNAP. We're talking about you having a certain amount of money based on your household size that you can take and do what you will with it in that period of time. Now, the fellow that brought the Fair Tax Act for this Congress, Buddy Carter from Georgia's first district, Representative Buddy Carter, has a page on his website that talks about some of the myths that people hear about the fair tax and inclusive versus exclusive, the
mhm.
23% inclusive or 30% exclusive. But you as a consumer, we all will get, based on the poverty level, a dollar amount in advance of in advance of the month going forward, called the prebate, so we can buy things that we need, necessary goods, food, shelter, medicine, essentially tax free, similar to the current individual exemption and refundable tax credit system that's
Yeah,
embedded in part of the income
yeah,
tax.
yeah. We're uncovering tax credit after tax credit after tax credit, or proposed tax credit after proposed tax credit every week on the Fair Tax Power Radio Congress.gov segment. But the Fair Tax just says, okay, you do not owe tax on your spending up to the poverty level. What you spend it on, your business. Now, I for one, would indeed consider cheerwine to be a basic necessity, and I would have to buy that. And under the fair tax, I could buy my cheerwine tax free. If you wanted something else for some reason, which I could never fully understand, but if you had a different thing that you want to have, that you have that decision, and you can buy whatever you want tax free, and I can buy mine tax free, and the government has no business telling either of us what we can and can't get tax free. It says leave it up to you. Buy what you want. We'll refund the taxes you pay up to the poverty level, regardless of what you spend it on, and we're not going to mess with you. That is so elegantly beautiful, elegantly simple, and it works. Why do people not demand the fair tax? Just is not registering in my brain. Go ahead.
Well, one of the reasons there's apprehension, this is a big change, uh, and because of the complexity of the current tax code. I mean, we've all, for our entire lives, this is the only way taxes have been collected for the federal government is through the income tax. And likewise, a lot of the states are income, but some of the states are going away from that. But when you look at what the fair tax does, it gives you the freedom to buy what you want to without regard to a restriction of any kind, with the money that you get as the prebate based
Yep.
on where you fall into the poverty level. You end up, let's say, $100 for something that you're buying. You're basically going to be paying 77 for the item and an inclusive $23 tax, 23% of the
Mm-hmm.
dollars included. Just like when you go to the gas station, your taxes, federal and state, are included in the price that you pay at the pump. And it shows up on your receipt. This is
Yep.
how much you pay. This is the fair tax. And the prebate, if you do it right, you'll end up being tax free up to a certain amount. What was it, like $30,000?
What we got? The 2025 prebate schedule. I'm looking at it right here for a married couple with two kids. We usually use the family of four a lot. The married couple with two kids is allowed a consumption allowance of $42,300. That's the poverty level for the family of that size. 23% of that is $9,729. That's how much you would get back in your prebate, because that's how much tax you would pay if you spent the $42,300 at the cash register on new retail goods and services.
Yeah.
They will put this on a monthly basis. A family of four gets $811 a month back in prebate. That's how much tax they pay that they don't owe. Now, this is something else. Some people will try to beat on the prebate and says, "Oh, wait a minute, that's a universal basic income, or that's some kind of entitlement of some kind." No, it is a refund of tax that you paid at the cash register that you did not owe. I mean, nobody looks at the tax refunds you get from the IRS when your withholding exceeds your tax liability and you get a refund at the end of the year. Nobody calls that an entitlement. Nobody calls that some kind of crazy thing like it's not a UBI. But anyway, that is all that the prebate is. It is a refund of taxes that you pay at the cash register that you do not owe. You do not owe any fair tax until your spending exceeds the poverty level. And just giving back the tax you pay on that level of spending is elegantly simple. It's elegant freedom as far as to buy what you want. And we're over time again. I tell you what, we could go on forever on this thing on FAIRtax Power Radio. But again, we do appreciate you tuning in every week. We're here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the FAIRtax official Facebook page. We stream simultaneously on the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel. Again, appreciate people sharing the videos, commenting on the videos and that. But we're going to have to bring things to a close, as we unfortunately have to do here on FAIRtax Power Radio. We will see you again same time next week, same time, same channel. I don't know where that came from, but it just sticks in the back of my head. Same time, same channel.
Batman.
Batman. Okay.
Same Batman.
I guess I watched too much of it as a kid. Anyway, we'll see you next week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month, on everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well, we believe taxes should be fair.